In the scorching heat of Afghanistan, Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez lay motionless for 6 hours, her body pressed against the rocky terrain, sweat pooling beneath her camouflage uniform. Through her scope, she watched enemy combatants move through the village below, unaware that death was watching them through the crosshairs of someone they would never expect. The same hands that once trembled from childhood bullying now held steady on a rifle that could end a life from over a mile away. The same voice that was once silenced by classmates' cruel laughter now whispered range calculations that would save the lives of her fellow soldiers. The same heart that once broke from being called worthless and weak now beat with the calm rhythm of someone who had found her purpose in the most unlikely place. This is not just a story about military service. This is the story of Sarah Mitchell, a woman who transformed from a bullied, underestimated teenager into one of the most feared and respected snipers in military history. It's about how the darkness of her past became the fuel for an extraordinary transformation that would shock everyone who thought they knew her limits. What you're about to read will challenge everything you think you know about strength, redemption, and the incredible power of the human spirit to rise above its circumstances. Because sometimes, the people who are pushed down the hardest are the ones who rise up the highest. Sarah Mitchell stood in front of her bathroom mirror, carefully applying concealer to the fresh bruise on her left cheek. At 17, she had become an expert at hiding the evidence of her daily torment. The bruise was courtesy of Jessica Crawford, the popular girl who seemed to take personal pleasure in making Sarah's life miserable. "Sarah, breakfast!" her mother called from downstairs. Sarah took one last look at her reflection, adjusting her oversized hoodie to hide her thin frame. She had learned that being invisible was safer than standing out. Riverside High School was a typical suburban institution where social hierarchies ruled with an iron fist. Sarah occupied the bottom rung of this ladder, a position that seemed carved out specifically for her. She was the girl with second-hand clothes, thick glasses, and a stutter that became worse when she was nervous, which was almost always. The abuse had started in middle school, but intensified when she entered high school. It wasn't just the physical confrontations, though those were bad enough. It was the systematic campaign of humiliation that followed her through every hallway, every classroom, every moment of her school day. Her textbooks would disappear, her locker would be vandalized with cruel messages, and eating lunch became an exercise in dodging food thrown in her direction. Marcus Thompson, the star quarterback, seemed to coordinate much of the harassment. He had a gift for turning everyday situations into opportunities to humiliate Sarah. During English class presentations, he would make loud comments about her appearance. In the cafeteria, he would orchestrate elaborate pranks that left Sarah covered in food or drink. The teachers either didn't notice or chose not to intervene, leaving Sarah to navigate this nightmare alone. Home wasn't much better. Sarah's father had left when she was 12, leaving her mother Linda to work 2 jobs just to keep their small apartment. Linda loved her daughter, but exhaustion left little time for meaningful conversation or support. Sarah learned to internalize her pain, building walls around her heart that seemed to grow higher with each passing day. The worst incident happened on a rainy Tuesday in October. Sarah was walking to her next class when Jessica and her friends cornered her in the empty hallway near the gymnasium. What started as verbal taunts quickly escalated when Jessica shoved Sarah against the lockers, causing her books to scatter across the wet floor. "Look at this pathetic loser," Jessica sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "Why don't you just disappear? Nobody wants you here anyway." As Sarah knelt to gather her soaked textbooks, Jessica's friend Emma kicked them away, sending papers flying in all directions. The small group laughed as Sarah scrambled on her hands and knees, desperate to collect her belongings before someone in authority noticed the commotion. "My dad says your mom cleans toilets at his office," Jessica continued, her voice loud enough to echo through the hallway. "Guess we know where you get your stench from." Sarah's hand shook as she tried to reassemble her scattered assignments. The rain from outside had mixed with the tears she couldn't hold back, creating dark spots on her homework that would earn her zeros from teachers who didn't care about her excuses. The final blow came when Marcus appeared, as if summoned by some cruel cosmic force. He surveyed the scene with obvious amusement before delivering the line that would haunt Sarah for years to come. "You know what, Mitchell? You're so pathetic that even the military wouldn't want you. They only take real people, not whatever you are." The laughter that followed his comment seemed to echo through the entire building. Sarah finished gathering her things in silence, her face burning with shame and rage. As she walked away, she heard Jessica call out, one final taunt. "Face it, freak, you'll never amount to anything. You're worthless, and everyone knows it." That night, Sarah lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, Marcus's words playing on repeat in her mind. The military wouldn't want her. She was worthless. She would never amount to anything. Each phrase hit her like a physical blow, confirming every doubt she had ever harbored about herself. But somewhere in the darkness of that October night, something began to shift inside Sarah Mitchell. The same pain that had been crushing her spirit for years suddenly crystallized into something else entirely. A burning determination to prove every single one of them wrong. She began researching military service online, staying up late into the night reading about training requirements, physical standards, and different career paths within the armed forces. What she discovered surprised her. The military wasn't just about being big and strong, it was about discipline, precision, and mental toughness, qualities that years of surviving high school bullying had been secretly developing within her. Sarah started a private training regimen in her tiny bedroom, doing push-ups and sit-ups while her mother worked late shifts. She began running before dawn, using the empty streets as her personal training ground. Every mile she ran, every push-up she completed, was fueled by the memory of their mocking laughter. The transformation wasn't immediate or easy. Sarah's body was unaccustomed to physical exertion, and her first attempts at exercise left her sore and discouraged. But the mental training ground of high school had taught her something valuable: how to endure pain and keep moving forward. 3 months into her secret training program, something unexpected happened during her morning run. She encountered a group of local veterans who met regularly for early morning fitness sessions in the park. Initially terrified of being judged or rejected, Sarah almost turned around when she saw them. Instead, she found herself approaching their informal leader, a middle-aged man named Carl Williams who had served 3 tours in Iraq. Carl noticed her hesitation and invited her to join their group. To Sarah's amazement, these veterans didn't care about her social status or her appearance. They cared about effort, determination, and respect, qualities Sarah possessed in abundance. Under Carl's guidance, Sarah's training became more focused and effective. She learned proper form for exercises, discovered her surprising endurance capabilities, and began to understand military culture and values. More importantly, she found a community where she was valued for her determination rather than judged for her circumstances. The bullying at school continued, but Sarah's response began to change. She still endured the physical and emotional abuse, but inside, she carried a secret weapon: the knowledge that she was working towards something bigger than their small-minded cruelty. Every insult became fuel for her training. Every moment of humiliation strengthened her resolve. By spring, Sarah's physical transformation was becoming noticeable. Her thin frame had developed lean muscle, her posture had improved, and there was something different in her eyes. A quiet confidence that her tormentors couldn't quite identify, but instinctively found unsettling. The day before graduation, Jessica confronted Sarah one final time in the school parking lot. But this time, something was different. When Jessica shoved her, Sarah didn't stumble. When the insults came, Sarah looked directly into Jessica's eyes without flinching. "You think you're tough now?" Jessica spat, unnerved by Sarah's steady gaze. "You're still the same pathetic loser you always were." Sarah didn't respond with words. Instead, she simply smiled, a quiet, knowing smile that seemed to carry secrets Jessica couldn't begin to understand. Then she walked away, leaving Jessica standing alone in the parking lot, confused and somehow diminished by the encounter. That night, Sarah sat at her small desk and filled out her military enlistment paperwork. In the section asking for career preferences, she paused for a long moment before writing down something that would have made Marcus Thompson laugh until he cried: infantry, with a preference for specialized training. As she sealed the envelope, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The girl who had been told she would never amount to anything was about to embark on a path that would test every limit she thought she had. The worthless freak was going to become something her tormentors could never imagine. She had no idea that her natural stillness, developed through years of trying to remain invisible, would make her an ideal sniper. She couldn't have known that her ability to endure prolonged discomfort, honed through countless hours of bullying, would serve her perfectly during long reconnaissance missions. And she certainly couldn't have predicted that the same focus and determination that had helped her survive high school would make her one of the most effective soldiers her unit had ever seen. The next morning, Sarah Mitchell walked across the graduation stage to receive her diploma. In the audience, her mother wiped away tears of pride, while her former tormentors sat oblivious to the fact that they had just witnessed the first step in one of the most remarkable military careers in recent history. 3 weeks later, Sarah boarded a bus bound for basic training, carrying nothing but a small duffel bag and an unshakable determination to prove that the girl they had dismissed as worthless was capable of extraordinary things. The transformation was about to begin in earnest. The bus ride to Fort Benning, Georgia stretched for 18 hours, giving Sarah plenty of time to second-guess her decision. As the landscape changed from suburban neighborhoods to rural farmland and finally to the imposing gates of the military installation, she felt her stomach churning with a mixture of fear and anticipation. She wasn't alone on the bus. Dozens of other young recruits filled the seats, most of them male, many of them looking like they had stepped off the pages of a fitness magazine. Sarah pulled her baseball cap lower over her eyes and tried to make herself invisible, an old habit that would prove harder to break than she imagined. The reception station was a blur of shouting drill instructors, medical examinations, and paperwork. Sarah found herself swept along in a tide of organized chaos that would define her next several months. When she was assigned to Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, she discovered she was one of only 6 women in a group of nearly 200 recruits. Drill Sergeant Patricia Hayes was a compact woman with eyes like steel and a voice that could cut through concrete. During the first formation, she walked slowly through the ranks, sizing up each recruit with a gaze that seemed to catalogue their strengths and weaknesses in seconds. When she reached Sarah, Drill Sergeant Hayes stopped and studied her for what felt like an eternity. Sarah's heart hammered in her chest as she maintained the position of attention, staring straight ahead while feeling completely exposed under the drill sergeant's scrutiny. "Mitchell," Hayes said, reading from her clipboard. 5'4", 110 pounds. "Tell me, recruit, what makes you think you can hack it in my army?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sarah could feel the eyes of every other recruit burning into her, waiting to see if she would crack under the pressure. For a moment, she was transported back to the hallways of Riverside High School, facing down Jessica Crawford and Marcus Thompson. But this time was different. This time, she had trained. This time, she had purpose. "Drill Sergeant, I believe determination matters more than size," Sarah responded, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "I'm here to prove what I'm capable of." Hayes raised an eyebrow, a ghost of a smile flickering across her stern features. "We'll see about that, Mitchell. We'll see about that." The first few weeks of basic training nearly broke Sarah's resolve. The physical demands were unlike anything she had experienced, even with her months of preparation. 5 a.m. reveille was followed by formation runs that left her gasping for air, while others seemed to cruise effortlessly alongside her. The obstacle courses were particularly challenging. Sarah's small stature worked against her on events requiring upper body strength, like rope climbs and wall traversals. She watched in frustration as larger recruits powered through obstacles that left her struggling and often failing. Her bunkmates were a mixed group. Some, like Jennifer Martinez from Texas, were supportive and encouraging. Others, like Robert Kane from Chicago, seemed to view her presence as a liability to the entire platoon. Kane was particularly vocal about his belief that women didn't belong in combat roles. "Mitchell's going to get people killed," he complained loudly, during a particularly difficult training exercise where Sarah had fallen behind the group. "She can't keep up, and she can't carry her weight. This isn't about being mean, it's about survival." The criticism stung because part of Sarah feared he was right. During combat simulations, she struggled with the weight of her equipment. Her marksmanship scores were average at best. Her physical training test scores placed her in the bottom quartile of the company, though she was improving slowly. The breaking point came during the 4th week of training. The company was conducting a night navigation exercise that required recruits to find their way through dense forest using only a compass and map. Sarah had always been good with directions, and she completed the course successfully within the time limit. However, when she reached the final checkpoint, she discovered that 3 of her fellow recruits, including Kane, had become completely lost in the woods. Protocol dictated that she should report to the cadre and continue with the next phase of training. Instead, Sarah made a decision that would define the rest of her military career. She went back into the woods to find them. Using skills she had developed during her solitary runs through unfamiliar neighborhoods, Sarah systematically searched the training area. She found Kane first, disoriented and frustrated, sitting beside a stream nearly 2 miles off course. Without saying a word, she helped him find his bearings and guided him toward the correct checkpoint. The second lost recruit, Maria Santos from New Mexico, was in a state of near panic when Sarah found her. Santos had twisted her ankle and was convinced she was going to be dropped from the program for failing to complete the exercise. Sarah fashioned a makeshift support from her equipment and helped Santos hobble to safety. The third recruit, David Park, had actually injured himself more seriously, cutting his hand badly on a sharp branch while trying to push through thick underbrush. Sarah used her first aid training to clean and bandage the wound before guiding him back to the proper route. By the time Sarah finally made it to the final checkpoint, she was 3 hours past the deadline and expected to face serious consequences for her unauthorized rescue mission. Instead, she found Drill Sergeant Hayes waiting for her with an expression that was impossible to read. "Explain yourself, Mitchell," Hayes commanded. Sarah straightened her shoulders and looked directly at the drill sergeant. "Drill sergeant, my fellow soldiers needed help. I couldn't leave them behind." Hayes studied her for a long moment before responding. "Your actions tonight violated direct orders and training protocols. You could be dropped from the program." Sarah's heart sank, but she maintained her military bearing. "Yes, Drill Sergeant, I understand. However," Hayes continued, "you also demonstrated leadership, initiative, and the kind of loyalty we want to see in our soldiers. You put the welfare of your team above your own interests, even when it put you at risk." The next morning, Sarah discovered that word of her nighttime rescue had spread throughout the company. Kane, who had been her harshest critic, approached her during morning chow with a look of grudging respect. "I owe you an apology, Mitchell," he said quietly. "And a debt I'm not sure I can ever repay. You could have left me out there, especially after the way I've been treating you." Sarah looked at him steadily. "We're all on the same team, Kane. That's what teams do. We look out for each other." The incident marked a turning point in Sarah's basic training experience. Her fellow recruits began to see her differently, not as a liability, but as someone who could be trusted when things got difficult.
More importantly, Sarah began to see herself differently.
She threw herself into training with renewed determination. Her physical fitness scores began to improve steadily. She sought out extra instruction on marksmanship and discovered she had a natural aptitude for precision shooting that had been masked by her initial nervousness. During weapons training, something clicked for Sarah in a way that surprised everyone, including herself. The same steady hands that had once trembled from fear now held rifles with remarkable stability. The same focused concentration that had helped her survive years of bullying now translated into exceptional accuracy on the firing range. Drill Sergeant Hayes noticed the improvement and began providing Sarah with additional coaching. "You've got good instincts, Mitchell," Hayes told her after a particularly impressive shooting session. "You're calm under pressure, methodical in your approach, and you don't let emotions interfere with your performance. Have you considered specialized training after basic?" The idea had never occurred to Sarah, but Hayes' suggestion planted a seed that would grow throughout the remainder of her training. She began researching different military occupational specialties, particularly those that emphasized precision and individual skill over raw physical strength. The final phase of basic training included a comprehensive field exercise that tested everything the recruits had learned over the previous months. Sarah's company was divided into squads and given a series of realistic combat scenarios to navigate. During the culminating event, Sarah's squad was tasked with conducting a reconnaissance mission on a simulated enemy position. The mission required them to remain undetected while gathering intelligence on enemy movements and capabilities. Sarah volunteered for the most dangerous role, the advanced scout who would need to get closest to the enemy position to gather detailed information. Her small size and natural ability to move quietly made her ideal for the task, though it also put her at the greatest risk of discovery and simulated capture. She spent 6 hours in position, methodically observing and documenting enemy activities while remaining completely motionless in thick underbrush. When enemy patrols passed within feet of her hiding position, Sarah controlled her breathing and heart rate with a discipline that amazed even herself. The intelligence she gathered was so detailed and accurate that the evaluating cadre initially suspected she had somehow cheated or received unauthorized assistance. Only after reviewing footage from hidden cameras confirmed that she had accomplished the mission entirely through skill and determination did they accept her remarkable performance. Graduation from basic training was unlike anything Sarah had ever experienced. As she stood in formation wearing her dress uniform, she felt a pride that had nothing to do with external validation and everything to do with personal achievement. She had not only survived the crucible of military training, she had excelled in ways that surprised everyone who knew her story. Her mother made the trip from their small apartment to attend the ceremony, tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter receive recognition for outstanding performance during training. For Linda Mitchell, seeing her daughter transformed from a bullied teenager into a confident soldier was nothing short of miraculous. But the most significant moment came when Drill Sergeant Hayes pulled Sarah aside after the ceremony. "Mitchell, I've been doing this for 12 years, and I've seen thousands of recruits come through this program. You've got something special, a combination of mental toughness, attention to detail, and calm under pressure that can't be taught." Hayes handed Sarah a packet of information about advanced individual training opportunities. I'm recommending you for sniper school. It's one of the most demanding programs the Army offers, and the failure rate is extremely high. But I think you've got what it takes to not just succeed, but excel. Sarah took the packet with hands that barely trembled, a far cry from the shaking teenager who had once cowered in school hallways. As she flipped through the information about sniper training, she thought about Marcus Thompson's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. Even the military wouldn't want you. She smiled to herself, imagining his reaction if he could see her now. The worthless girl he had dismissed so cruelly was about to embark on training to become one of the most elite soldiers in the American military. That night, Sarah called her mother from the base phone to share the news about her acceptance into advanced training. As she described the opportunities ahead of her, she realized that the frightened teenager who had boarded a bus to Fort Benning no longer existed. In her place stood a confident, capable soldier who had discovered that her greatest strengths had been hiding inside her perceived weaknesses all along. The journey to becoming a sniper was just beginning, but Sarah Mitchell was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The girl who had been broken by bullying had been forged into something unbreakable by the military. Soon, she would discover just how deadly that transformation could be. Fort Benning Sniper School occupied a remote corner of the sprawling Georgia military installation, far from the main training areas where regular infantry soldiers learned their trades. The compound was deliberately isolated, designed to create an atmosphere where only the most dedicated and capable students could thrive under intense pressure. Sarah arrived at the school on a sweltering Monday morning in July, carrying her issued equipment and a determination forged through months of preparation. The bus dropped her and 11 other candidates at the entrance to a facility that looked more like a university campus than a military training center, if universities specialized in the art of long-range precision killing. The other students were an intimidating group, 10 men and 1 other woman, all of whom carried themselves with the confidence of soldiers who had already proven themselves in their respective units. Sarah learned that most had combat experience, advanced marksmanship awards, or special operations backgrounds. She was the only candidate coming directly from basic training, a fact that made her stand out in ways she wished she could avoid. Staff Sergeant Michael Torres, the chief instructor, addressed the group during their first formation. He was a lean man with piercing green eyes and the kind of stillness that suggested coiled energy waiting to be released. His introduction was brief and direct. For the next 8 weeks, you will be pushed beyond every limit you think you have. The failure rate for this course is 73%. Most of you will not graduate. Those who do will join one of the most elite communities in the American military. Torres walked slowly through the small formation, studying each candidate with the intensity of a predator evaluating potential threats. When he reached Sarah, he paused just long enough to make her wonder if he was already identifying her as a likely failure. Sniper training isn't about learning to shoot, he continued, resuming his position at the front of the group. Any decent soldier can learn to hit a target. This course is about developing the mental discipline, physical endurance, and technical expertise to eliminate specific threats at extreme distances under the worst possible conditions. The first week focused on marksmanship fundamentals that were far more advanced than anything Sarah had encountered in basic training. Students learned to account for wind speed and direction, temperature variations, atmospheric pressure, and even the rotation of the Earth when calculating shots at extreme distances. Sarah discovered that her natural steadiness and ability to remain motionless for extended periods gave her significant advantages in this environment. While other students struggled with maintaining consistent shooting positions during long training sessions, Sarah seemed to settle into a state of relaxed alertness that allowed her to maintain perfect form for hours. However, the academic portions of the training proved challenging in ways she hadn't anticipated. Students were required to master complex mathematical calculations, memorize detailed ballistic tables, and understand the technical specifications of multiple weapon systems and ammunition types. The homework load was enormous. Every evening, Sarah spent hours studying range estimation techniques, atmospheric effects on bullet trajectory, and target identification protocols. She filled notebook after notebook with calculations and diagrams, often working by flashlight long after lights out when her roommate was asleep. Her roommate was Lieutenant Rebecca Stone, a National Guard officer from Montana with a background in competitive shooting. Stone had won numerous civilian marksmanship competitions and carried herself with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to being the best shooter in any group. Initially, Stone seemed puzzled by Sarah's presence in the program. "No offense," she said during their first week together, "but I'm surprised they accepted someone straight from basic. This course usually requires significant prior experience. Sarah had learned to let her performance speak for itself rather than trying to justify her presence with words. On the shooting range, she consistently placed her shots within acceptable parameters. During stalking exercises, where students had to approach targets while remaining undetected, her small size and natural ability to move quietly gave her distinct advantages. The stalking phase of training was particularly demanding. Students were required to advance hundreds of yards across open terrain while remaining invisible to observers equipped with binoculars and spotting scopes. The exercise culminated with taking a precise shot from a concealed position, then remaining hidden while observers attempted to locate the shooter. Sarah excelled at these exercises in ways that surprised even herself. Her years of trying to remain invisible in school hallways translated perfectly to military fieldcraft. She instinctively understood how to use available cover, how to control her movement to avoid detection, and how to remain motionless for hours while maintaining focus on her objective. During the third week of training, Sarah achieved something that had never happened in the program's history. She completed a stalking exercise without being detected by any of the observer team, despite being positioned in relatively open terrain with minimal available concealment. Staff Sergeant Torres called her aside after the exercise. "Mitchell, I need to understand how you did that. The observer team had thermal imaging, high-powered optics, and perfect weather conditions. You were essentially invisible out there." Sarah struggled to explain her success. "Staff Sergeant, I just tried to think about what they would be looking for and avoid doing those things. I moved when the wind moved the grass around me, and I stopped whenever birds or small animals seemed disturbed by my presence." Torres studied her with new interest. "You were reading the environment and using it to mask your movement. That's an advanced technique that most students don't develop until much later in their careers." "Where did you learn that?" "I didn't learn it anywhere, Staff Sergeant. It just seemed like the logical approach." That evening, Torres pulled Sarah's file and spent considerable time reviewing her background and training records. What he discovered challenged many of his assumptions about the type of person who excelled in sniper training. Sarah's psychological profile indicated exceptional stress tolerance, methodical thinking patterns, and an unusual ability to maintain focus during extended periods of inactivity. The fourth week introduced students to advanced weapon systems and ballistic computers. They learned to use range-finding equipment, atmospheric monitoring devices, and computerized ballistic calculators that could account for dozens of variables affecting long-range accuracy. Sarah approached this technical training with the same methodical intensity she brought to everything else. While other students seemed overwhelmed by the complexity of the equipment, Sarah broke each system down into its component parts and mastered them individually, before attempting to integrate everything into a cohesive shooting solution. Her attention to detail became legendary among the instructors. During equipment inspections, Sarah's gear was consistently perfect. Every item cleaned, maintained, and positioned exactly according to specifications. Her shooting logs were models of precision, with detailed notes about weather conditions, ammunition performance, and lessons learned from each training session. The middle portion of the course focused on observation and intelligence gathering. Students learned to identify vehicle types, estimate personnel numbers, and recognize weapons and equipment from extreme distances. They practiced using various optical devices and learned to create detailed intelligence reports based on their observations. Sarah's artistic background, which had been another source of mockery in high school, proved unexpectedly valuable in this phase of training. Her ability to notice small details and accurately sketch what she observed made her field reports exceptionally useful to instructors who were evaluating student progress. During a complex observation exercise, Sarah was positioned nearly a mile from a simulated enemy camp and tasked with gathering detailed intelligence about personnel and activities. Over a 6-hour period, she documented the routines of camp personnel, identified key leaders based on how others interacted with them, and created detailed sketches of vehicles and equipment. Her final report was so thorough and accurate that it was used as an example for future classes. She had identified details that other students missed, including a concealed weapons cache and the presence of what appeared to be a high-value individual based on the deference shown by other personnel. Lieutenant Stone began to view Sarah with grudging respect. "I have to admit," she said one evening as they cleaned their equipment, "you're not what I expected when I first saw you. You've got instincts for this work that can't be taught." The relationship between the two roommates evolved from polite tolerance to genuine friendship as they supported each other through the increasingly difficult training. Stone's competitive shooting background complemented Sarah's natural fieldcraft abilities, and they often studied together in the evenings. Week 6 introduced students to urban sniper operations, requiring them to adapt their skills to city environments with different concealment challenges and more complex target identification requirements. Students learn to use buildings, vehicles, and urban infrastructure to mask their positions while maintaining clear sight lines to their objectives. Sarah found urban operations particularly challenging because her preferred techniques for remaining concealed were less effective in concrete and steel environments. However, she adapted by developing new approaches that emphasized using shadows, architectural features, and urban noise to mask her presence. The final major exercise of urban training placed students in a mock city, where they had to eliminate multiple targets while remaining undetected by opposing force personnel who were actively searching for them. Sarah's small size allowed her to use hiding places that would have been impossible for larger students, and her patience enabled her to wait for perfect shot opportunities rather than rushing and exposing her position. During this exercise, Sarah achieved something that impressed even the most experienced instructors. She successfully engaged and eliminated 7 targets over a 4-hour period without being detected, despite the fact that opposing forces were using sophisticated counter-sniper techniques and had identified and eliminated most of the other student snipers. Her success came from a combination of careful position selection, patient observation of enemy patterns, and precisely timed shots that took advantage of background noise and visual distractions. After each successful engagement, she remained motionless in position for extended periods, allowing opposing forces to search areas where they thought the shots had originated while she remained invisible nearby. Week 7 brought the most challenging phase of training: stress shooting under combat conditions. Students were required to maintain accuracy while experiencing physical exhaustion, psychological pressure, and simulated combat stress. The exercises included shooting after extended periods of physical exertion, engaging targets while under time pressure, and maintaining precision while subjected to loud noises, bright lights, and other sensory distractions. Sarah's years of enduring bullying had prepared her for psychological pressure in ways that surprised her instructors. While other students showed degraded performance under stress, Sarah seemed to become more focused and precise as conditions became more challenging. During the final stress shooting exercise, students were required to complete a grueling obstacle course, then immediately engage precision targets at various distances, while instructors subjected them to harassment and distractions designed to break their concentration. Sarah not only completed the course successfully, but achieved the highest accuracy score in the class. Her shooting was actually more precise under stress than it had been during relaxed training conditions, a phenomenon that Torres had rarely observed in his years of instruction. As the 8-week course neared its conclusion, only 4 of the original 12 students remained. Sarah, Lieutenant Stone, and 2 experienced male soldiers had survived the elimination process and were preparing for graduation. The final exercise was a comprehensive field problem that combined all the skills students had learned throughout the course. Teams of 2 students were assigned specific targets in a realistic combat scenario and given 48 hours to plan and execute their mission. Sarah was paired with Sergeant First Class Martinez, a special operations veteran with multiple combat deployments. Initially, Martinez was skeptical about working with someone so inexperienced, but Sarah's performance throughout the course had earned the respect of both instructors and fellow students. Their target was a high-value individual, located in a fortified compound, nearly 800 yards from the nearest feasible shooting position. The approach to the position required crossing open terrain under observation from multiple security checkpoints, then remaining concealed for potentially hours while waiting for a clear shot opportunity. Sarah and Martinez spent 12 hours planning their approach, studying aerial photographs, weather forecasts, and intelligence reports about enemy security procedures. Sarah's methodical nature complemented Martinez's tactical experience, resulting in a plan that accounted for multiple contingencies and alternative approaches. The mission execution required them to begin movement in complete darkness, navigate several miles of difficult terrain, and establish their shooting position before dawn. Sarah's stalking skills proved crucial during the approach phase, as she identified and helped them avoid multiple security patrols that could have compromised their mission. Once in position, they had to wait nearly 6 hours before their target appeared in a location that allowed for a clear shot. During this time, Sarah remained motionless behind her rifle, maintaining perfect sight picture while ignoring discomfort, fatigue, and the psychological pressure of knowing that their entire course grade depended on this single shot. When the target finally presented himself, Sarah's shot was perfect, a precise hit at 847 yards that demonstrated mastery of every skill the course had taught. The follow-up extraction was equally successful, with both students remaining undetected throughout their withdrawal from the area. Graduation from sniper school was held on a Friday morning in September. Sarah stood at attention in her dress uniform, wearing the distinctive sniper badge that marked her as a member of one of the military's most elite communities. Her mother had again made the trip to attend the ceremony, along with Carl Williams, the veteran who had first encouraged her training efforts. Staff Sergeant Torres addressed the graduating class with words that would stay with Sarah for the rest of her career. You four represent the best of what American soldiers can become when dedication meets opportunity. You've mastered skills that few people will ever understand and accepted responsibilities that will weigh on you for the rest of your lives.
After the ceremony, Torres pulled Sarah aside for a private conversation.
Mitchell, in 12 years of running this program, I've never seen a student with your combination of natural ability and work ethic. You've got a gift for this work that's extraordinary. He handed her orders for her first assignment, a deployment to Afghanistan with an infantry unit that specifically requested a sniper team. This is where you'll find out what all this training really means, Torres said. Everything you've learned here is just preparation for the real work that's waiting for you. As Sarah read her deployment orders, she thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The bullied teenager who had been dismissed as worthless was now a graduate of one of the most challenging military training programs in the world. But more than that, she had discovered something about herself that she never could have imagined. She was exceptionally good at something that really mattered. The same qualities that had made her a target for bullies had made her an exceptional sniper. The girl who had once tried to be invisible was about to become the most dangerous person her enemies would never see coming. The cargo plane's engines created a constant roar that made conversation impossible, leaving Sarah alone with her thoughts during the long flight to Bagram Airfield. She was traveling with her new spotter, Staff Sergeant David Kim, an experienced soldier who had volunteered to work with the unit's new sniper after reading her training scores. Afghanistan in October was a landscape of contradictions. Breathtaking mountain vistas interrupted by evidence of decades of war, ancient villages that seemed unchanged for centuries existing alongside modern military installations. Sarah's first glimpse of the country came through the small window of the transport aircraft as it descended through the thin mountain air toward the sprawling American base. Bagram was unlike anything she had experienced during her training. The base housed thousands of soldiers from multiple nations, creating a small city in the middle of one of the world's most dangerous regions. The constant activity, helicopters taking off and landing, convoys preparing for missions, soldiers training for combat operations, created an atmosphere of barely controlled energy that both excited and intimidated Sarah. She was assigned to Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion, 75th Infantry Regiment, a unit with a reputation for conducting some of the most dangerous missions in the theater. The company commander, Captain Jennifer Walsh, was a decorated officer who had already completed 2 previous deployments and understood the value of precise, long-range fire support. Captain Walsh studied Sarah's file during their first meeting, clearly puzzled by the decision to assign such an inexperienced soldier to her unit. Mitchell, I'll be honest with you. When I requested sniper support, I was expecting someone with combat experience. Your training scores are impressive, but this isn't a training environment. Sarah maintained her military bearing while responding. Ma'am, I understand your concerns. I'm prepared to prove myself through my performance rather than my background. Walsh appreciated the direct response. Fair enough. You'll be working primarily with 1st Platoon, supporting their patrol missions in the Tangi Valley. That area has been particularly active lately, with increased enemy movement and several recent attacks on our patrols. The Tangi Valley was a strategic corridor that connected several major population centers, making it crucial for both coalition forces and Taliban fighters. The terrain was challenging. Rocky hills overlooking narrow valleys where villages had existed for centuries. It was perfect sniper country, offering excellent observation positions and clear fields of fire at extreme distances. Sarah's first mission came just 3 days after her arrival. 1st Platoon was conducting a patrol through several villages where intelligence reports suggested Taliban fighters were recruiting local supporters and gathering supplies for future attacks. Sarah and Kim were tasked with providing overwatch from elevated positions, watching for threats that ground forces might miss. The patrol began before dawn, with Sarah and Kim separating from the main force to establish their observation position on a ridge overlooking the planned route. The approach required a difficult climb through loose rock and sparse vegetation, carrying nearly 60 pounds of equipment, including Sarah's precision rifle and Kim's spotting scope and communications gear. Sarah's physical conditioning, developed through months of training and refined during sniper school, allowed her to complete the climb without significant fatigue. More importantly, her ability to move quietly through difficult terrain meant they reached their position without alerting potential enemy observers to their presence. The shooting position offered commanding views of 3 villages and the connecting roads where the patrol would be traveling. Sarah established her rifle on a bipod, carefully adjusting her position to ensure stability and comfort for what could be hours of observation. Through her scope, Sarah watched the valley come alive as the sun rose over the mountains. Farmers emerged to tend their fields, children played in dusty courtyards, and merchants began setting up their stalls in the village markets. It was her first real glimpse of Afghan civilian life, and the normalcy of the scene contrasted sharply with her reason for being there. Kim maintained communication with the patrol while scanning the area through his spotting scope, looking for signs of unusual activity or potential threats. His experience complemented Sarah's technical skills, and they quickly developed an efficient working rhythm. The patrol's movement through the first village proceeded without incident. Sarah tracked their progress while simultaneously scanning for potential sniper positions, weapons emplacements, or other signs of enemy presence. Her training had taught her to look for subtle indicators, windows that were too dark, rooftops with unusually good shooting angles, or vehicles positioned in ways that could facilitate rapid escape. It was in the second village that Kim spotted movement that didn't fit the normal pattern of civilian activity. Through his spotting scope, he observed several military-age males positioning themselves in locations that offered good observation of the patrol's route while providing easy escape routes. "I've got eyes on what appears to be spotters," Kim whispered into his radio, providing grid coordinates for each suspected position. 3 individuals, approximately 400 meters from your current position. Sarah shifted her rifle to cover the areas Kim had identified, studying the suspected positions through her scope. Her advanced optics allowed her to see details that would have been impossible to detect with standard infantry equipment. What she saw confirmed Kim's assessment. The men were clearly watching the patrol rather than going about normal village activities. More concerning, one appeared to be speaking into a radio or cell phone, likely coordinating with other fighters positioned elsewhere along the patrol route. The patrol leader requested permission to detain the suspects for questioning, but before the soldiers could change course, Sarah spotted movement that made her blood run cold. In a window approximately 600 meters from the patrol's position, she saw the unmistakable shape of a rifle barrel being positioned to cover the main road. "Sniper position," she called into her radio, her voice calm despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Window, 3rd building from the mosque, 2nd floor. I have a clear shot." The patrol immediately took cover while Sarah confirmed her target identification. Through her scope, she could see a Taliban fighter adjusting his position to line up a shot at the American soldiers below. He was focused entirely on his targets, unaware that he had become a target himself. Sarah controlled her breathing, checking wind conditions one final time before settling into her shooting position. The range was 623 meters, well within her capabilities but requiring precise calculation to account for the mountain altitude and crosswind conditions. Time seemed to slow as Sarah aligned her crosshairs, made final adjustments for environmental conditions, and prepared to take her first shot in combat. All the training, all the preparation, all the doubt and determination had led to this moment. Her shot was perfect. The Taliban sniper never knew what hit him, and the immediate threat to the patrol was eliminated. Sarah maintained her position, continuing to scan for additional threats while the patrol secured the area and continued their mission. Over the following weeks, Sarah's reputation within the battalion grew rapidly. Her ability to spot and eliminate threats at extreme distances saved American lives on multiple occasions. More importantly, her presence began to affect enemy behavior in ways that went beyond simple casualty counts. Taliban fighters in the Tangi Valley began to avoid positions that had previously been considered safe sniper hides. They moved more cautiously, spent less time exposed in defensive positions, and showed increased reluctance to engage American patrols. Sarah had become a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. Her most significant engagement came during her 6th week in country. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value Taliban commander was planning to meet with local tribal leaders in a village that had been increasingly hostile to coalition forces. The meeting was expected to result in increased support for Taliban operations throughout the region. Sarah and Kim were positioned on a mountainside nearly 1,000 meters from the suspected meeting location, tasked with observing the gathering and, if the opportunity presented itself, eliminating the Taliban commander. The position required an overnight approach march through difficult terrain, followed by a daylight hide in rocky terrain with minimal concealment. The target appeared just after midday, arriving in a convoy of vehicles with heavy security. Sarah watched through her scope as the man intelligence had identified as a key Taliban leader emerged from an armored vehicle and entered the village meeting hall. However, the shot was not immediately available. The target was surrounded by civilians and security personnel, making a precise engagement extremely difficult. Sarah would need to wait for the right opportunity, potentially for hours, while maintaining perfect readiness to engage if conditions changed. 4 hours into the surveillance, the target emerged from the meeting hall and began walking toward his vehicle. For a brief moment, he was separated from the civilians who had been providing concealment throughout the day. The shot was available, but the window was closing rapidly. Sarah had perhaps 3 seconds to make a decision that would affect the outcome of military operations throughout the region. The range was 987 meters, requiring her to account for significant bullet drop, wind drift, and the reduced air density of the high-altitude environment. Her shot dropped the target instantly, ending the career of a man responsible for coordinating attacks that had killed dozens of coalition soldiers and Afghan civilians. The security team's reaction was swift and professional, but Sarah and Kim had already begun their withdrawal from the area, moving carefully through terrain they had scouted during their approach. The successful elimination of the high-value target earned Sarah recognition throughout the theater of operations. Her commander put her in for a Bronze Star Medal, and requests began arriving from other units seeking sniper support for their most challenging missions. But with recognition came increased danger. Taliban forces had identified the presence of an exceptionally skilled American sniper in their area of operations and began taking countermeasures specifically designed to neutralize the threat she represented. During her 3rd month in country, Sarah and Kim were conducting overwatch for a patrol in an area where recent intelligence suggested enemy fighters were planning an ambush. Their position was carefully selected to provide excellent observation of the likely engagement area while offering multiple escape routes if they were discovered. What they didn't know was that Taliban forces had been studying American sniper tactics, learning to predict likely shooting positions, and developing techniques to locate and eliminate sniper teams. Sarah had become so effective that enemy commanders considered her elimination a high priority, worth significant resources and risk. The ambush, when it came, was not directed at the patrol Sarah was protecting. It was directed at Sarah herself. Taliban fighters had identified her position using techniques they had learned from studying previous American sniper operations, and they had positioned a coordinated assault team to eliminate her before she could affect the outcome of their planned attack on the patrol. The first indication that something was wrong came when Kim spotted movement that was clearly aimed at their position rather than at the patrol below. Through his spotting scope, he observed armed fighters moving in a coordinated pattern that could only be intended to surround and eliminate their observation post. "We're blown," Kim whispered into his radio, already beginning to pack his equipment for immediate departure.
Multiple fighters moving to surround our position.
"We need to move now." Sarah was in the middle of tracking a suspected Taliban leader when Kim's warning forced her to abandon her mission and focus on survival. The hunter had become the hunted, and the same skills that had made her such an effective sniper would now determine whether she survived the next few hours. The withdrawal from their position became a running battle through rocky terrain that offered both concealment and danger. Taliban fighters had positioned themselves to cut off the most obvious escape routes, forcing Sarah and Kim to improvise their way through terrain that seemed designed to favor the defenders. Sarah's ability to move quietly and find concealment became crucial as they evaded multiple attempts to surround and capture them. Her marksmanship skills, developed through months of training and refined in combat, allowed her to eliminate threats that would have prevented their escape. The engagement lasted nearly 4 hours as Sarah and Kim fought their way to a pickup point where American helicopters could extract them safely. When they finally reached friendly forces, both were exhausted and low on ammunition, but they had successfully evaded a coordinated attempt to eliminate them. The incident marked a turning point in Sarah's deployment. She had proven herself not just as a skilled marksman, but as a soldier capable of thinking tactically under extreme pressure and surviving in situations where her training was the only thing standing between her and death. More importantly, she had discovered that the girl who had once been afraid of confrontation was now someone who could face the most dangerous enemies in the world with calm determination. The transformation that had begun in a high school hallway was now complete, tested and proven in the crucible of combat. But Sarah's most challenging test was still ahead of her, in a mission that would push every skill she had developed to its absolute limit. The mission briefing took place in a secure conference room at Bagram Airfield, attended by officers whose ranks and decorations indicated this was no routine operation. Sarah sat alongside Kim and representatives from special operations units, intelligence agencies, and air support elements, all focused on a single objective that had been months in the planning. Colonel Richardson, the task force commander, addressed the assembled team with the gravity appropriate to the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have located Mahmoud al-Rashid, the Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks that have killed over 200 coalition personnel in the past 18 months. Intelligence indicates he will be attending a major gathering of regional Taliban leaders in a compound near the Pakistan border. The target profile displayed on the briefing screen showed a man in his 40s with distinctive facial scars and a reputation for tactical brilliance that had made him one of the most wanted individuals in the theater. Al-Rashid had evaded capture multiple times, always seeming to anticipate coalition operations before they could be executed. The compound is located in extremely difficult terrain, Richardson continued, surrounded by hostile forces and positioned to make conventional assault operations nearly impossible. Airstrikes are not feasible due to the presence of civilians and the risk of collateral damage. Sarah studied the aerial photographs and topographic maps that covered the briefing table. The target compound was situated in a narrow valley surrounded by steep mountains, accessible only through a limited number of heavily defended approaches. The nearest feasible sniper position was over 1,200 meters from the target building, requiring a shot at the extreme edge of her weapon system's effective range. Mitchell. Richardson addressed her directly. Intelligence indicates this gathering will last only 6 hours. Al-Rashid's security protocols suggest he will be exposed for no more than minutes during that entire period. You will have perhaps one opportunity to eliminate this target, and failure could mean he disappears for months or years. The weight of responsibility settled on Sarah's shoulders like a physical burden. Everything she had trained for, everything she had learnt in combat, would come down to a single shot that could change the course of operations throughout the region. The mission team would deploy by helicopter to a mountain landing zone 15 kilometers from the target area, then conduct an overnight approach march through some of Afghanistan's most dangerous terrain. Sarah and Kim would need to establish their shooting position in complete darkness, then wait for a target opportunity that might never come. Weather forecasts indicated challenging conditions, high winds, temperature variations, and the possibility of mountain storms that could make the shot impossible. The timing would need to be perfect with no margin for error or second chances. Sarah spent the next 48 hours in intensive preparation. She studied every available photograph of Al-Rashid, memorizing his appearance, movement patterns, and security procedures. She calculated ballistic solutions for multiple weather scenarios, accounting for the extreme range and high-altitude conditions that would affect bullet performance. Most importantly, she prepared mentally for a mission that would test every aspect of her development as both a soldier and a person. The bullied teenager, who had once been afraid to speak up in class, was now preparing to eliminate one of America's most dangerous enemies from over 3/4 of a mile away. The helicopter insertion went smoothly despite flying through mountainous terrain in complete darkness. Sarah and Kim separated from the main assault force, which would be standing by to exploit the confusion that would follow a successful shot. Their route to the shooting position required navigating steep mountain paths that would challenge even experienced climbers. Sarah's physical conditioning, developed through months of training and refined during her deployment, allowed her to maintain the pace required to reach their position before dawn. More critically, her ability to move quietly through difficult terrain meant they approached their destination without alerting the extensive security network Al-Rashid maintained throughout the region. The shooting position was a rocky outcropping that offered excellent concealment and clear sightlines to the target compound. However, establishing the position required several hours of careful preparation to ensure Sarah would have a stable shooting platform and clear escape routes if the mission was compromised. As dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah settled behind her rifle and began the methodical process of preparing for what would likely be the most important shot of her military career. She verified her range estimation using multiple techniques, confirmed her ballistic calculations, and established communication protocols with both Kim and the command element. Through her scope, Sarah could see the target compound coming alive as the sun rose higher. Vehicles began arriving carrying Taliban fighters and leaders from throughout the region. Security personnel established checkpoints and observation posts, creating a defensive network that would make conventional assault extremely costly. Hours passed with no sign of Al-Rashid. Sarah remained motionless behind her rifle, maintaining perfect sight picture while enduring the physical discomfort of remaining in a single position for extended periods. Her training in mental discipline, developed through years of surviving high school bullying and refined through military instruction, allowed her to maintain focus despite the psychological pressure. Kim monitored radio communications while scanning the compound through his spotting scope, looking for any indication that their primary target had arrived. Intelligence sources within the compound were providing periodic updates, but Al-Rashid's security protocols made it difficult to confirm his presence until he actually appeared. At 1:47 p.m., Kim received confirmation that Al-Rashid had arrived and was inside the main building meeting with other Taliban commanders. However, the building's construction and the presence of numerous security personnel meant Sarah would need to wait for him to emerge before having any shot opportunity. The waiting became a test of nerves that exceeded anything Sarah had experienced in her previous engagements. The target was confirmed to be present, but she had no way to predict when or if he would expose himself long enough for a successful shot. Every minute that passed increased the risk that intelligence sources would be discovered, or that changes in weather conditions would make the shot impossible. At 3:23 p.m., movement near the main building caught Kim's attention. Through his spotting scope, he observed several high-ranking Taliban figures emerging from the compound and walking toward a group of vehicles. One of the figures matched al-Rashid's description, but the positive identification would need to come from Sarah's higher-powered optics. Sarah shifted her rifle to cover the area Kim had identified, using her scope's magnification to study the individuals who had emerged from the building. The man Kim had spotted bore a strong resemblance to their target, but positive identification was complicated by the distance and the presence of several other figures of similar build and appearance. Then al-Rashid turned to speak with one of his subordinates, providing Sarah with a clear view of the distinctive facial scarring that confirmed his identity. The target was 1,237 meters away, surrounded by other people, and moving toward a vehicle that would provide him with armored protection within seconds. Sarah had perhaps 15 seconds to make a shot that would require compensating for extreme range, high-altitude air density, crosswind conditions, and the movement of both her target and the other individuals around him. Everything she had learned about precision shooting, tactical decision-making, and performing under pressure would be tested in the next few moments. She controlled her breathing, verified her ballistic solution one final time, and settled her crosshairs on a point calculated to intercept al-Rashid's movement toward his vehicle. The mathematical precision required for the shot was staggering. A miscalculation of inches would result in either missing the target entirely or hitting one of the civilians in the compound. Sarah's finger found the trigger, applying pressure with the same steady control she had developed through thousands of training rounds. In her mind, she was no longer the frightened teenager who had been bullied and dismissed by her classmates. She was a professional soldier, trained to perform precise, difficult tasks under the worst possible conditions. The shot broke cleanly, sending a precisely calculated projectile across nearly 3/4 of a mile of mountain air. Sarah maintained her sight picture, tracking the bullet's impact, while already beginning to prepare for immediate departure from the area. Through her scope, Sarah watched al-Rashid drop instantly, eliminated by a shot that intelligence analysts would later describe as one of the most technically demanding successful sniper engagements in military history. The confusion that followed his death allowed Sarah and Kim to begin their withdrawal, while Taliban security forces struggled to understand what had happened. The extraction required moving through hostile territory, while enemy forces searched frantically for the sniper team that had eliminated their most important leader. Sarah's ability to move quietly and find concealment, developed through years of trying to avoid bullies and refined through military training, proved crucial as they evaded multiple search parties during their movement to the pickup point. When American helicopters finally extracted them 6 hours later, Sarah had completed a mission that would affect the course of military operations throughout Afghanistan. The elimination of al-Rashid disrupted Taliban command structures throughout the region and saved the lives of countless coalition personnel and Afghan civilians. The mission earned Sarah the Silver Star, one of the highest decorations for combat valor. During the awards ceremony, attended by senior military leaders from throughout the theater, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The girl who had been dismissed as worthless by high school bullies had become one of the most effective combat soldiers in the American military. The teenager who had been told she would never amount to anything had just completed one of the most significant single soldier achievements of the entire war. But more than the military recognition, Sarah had discovered something profound about human potential and the power of determination to overcome seemingly impossible circumstances. The same qualities that had made her a target for bullying, her quiet nature, attention to detail, and ability to remain calm under pressure, had made her an exceptional soldier. When Sarah returned to the United States 18 months later, she carried with her the knowledge that she had not only survived her transformation from victim to warrior, but had excelled beyond anything her younger self could have imagined possible. She received a hero's welcome in her hometown, where local news media covered her achievements and military decorations. The high school that had once been the site of her daily torment invited her to speak at graduation ceremonies, though Sarah declined the invitation with characteristic humility. Marcus Thompson, who had once declared that the military wouldn't want her, now worked at a local auto parts store and struggled with addiction issues. Jessica Crawford, who had delighted in calling her worthless, was working multiple minimum-wage jobs to support 2 children from different fathers. The cruel prophecies they had made about Sarah's future had instead become descriptions of their own lives. But Sarah felt no satisfaction from their struggles. Her journey had taught her that true strength came not from dominating others, but from overcoming the limitations that others tried to impose. The bullying that had once defined her pain had become the foundation for her greatest achievements. During a quiet ceremony at the local Veterans Hall, Carl Williams, the veteran who had first encouraged her training efforts, presented Sarah with a custom-made plaque commemorating her service. The inscription reads simply, "To Sarah Mitchell, who proved that the measure of a person is not where they start but how far they're willing to go." Sarah kept the plaque on her desk as she transitioned into a new career training other soldiers in precision shooting and tactical skills. Her reputation had spread throughout the military community, and she received requests from units around the world seeking her expertise. But her most important work came in the form of mentoring young soldiers who reminded her of her younger self. Quiet, underestimated individuals who carried within them the potential for extraordinary achievement. Sarah recognized in them the same qualities that had once made her a target for cruelty, but had ultimately become the source of her greatest strength. Years later, when military historians studied the campaigns in Afghanistan, Sarah's shot that eliminated al-Rashid would be cited as a turning point in regional operations. The technical difficulty of the engagement, combined with its strategic impact, made it a case study in precision warfare and individual soldier effectiveness. But for Sarah, the most important legacy of her transformation was not the military decorations or historical significance of her achievements. It was the knowledge that she had taken the worst experiences of her life and used them as raw material for becoming something extraordinary. The bullied teenager who had once hidden in school bathrooms to avoid her tormentors had become someone who could face the most dangerous enemies in the world with calm determination. The girl who had been told she was worthless had proven that human potential, when combined with determination and proper training, had no limits. Sarah Mitchell's story became proof that sometimes the people who are pushed down the hardest are the ones who rise up the highest, and that true strength is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward despite it. In transforming herself from victim to warrior, she had not only changed her own life but had saved the lives of countless others and altered the course of history in ways both large and small. The silence before her final shot had lasted only seconds, but the impact of that moment would echo through the years as testimony to the extraordinary things that become possible when determination meets opportunity, and when someone refuses to accept the limitations that others try to impose upon them.